In the heart of the African wilderness, where the sun burns the earth into a cracked mosaic, the wind carries the scent of dust and ancient death, there is no such thing as a hero. Out here, the concept of mercy is a human delusion, a luxury that the savannah cannot afford. The wild doesn't care about your legends, your lineage, or the weight of the crown you think you wear. It only cares about survival, and it has a sadistic way of reminding the powerful that their time is always running out. What you are about to hear is not a nature documentary meant for the faint of heart. This is a chronicle of cold-blooded execution, a visceral record of how an empire of terror was dismantled piece by piece, bone by bone, in a calculated massacre that remains etched in the nightmares of the rangers who witnessed it. This is the story of the Mapogo Lions and the rising shadows that came to erase them, one by one. For nearly 6 years, the Sabi Sands Reserve was a kingdom of fear. The Mapogo Coalition, 6 massive males with a bloodlust that defied biological norms, had turned 70,000 hectares into their personal slaughterhouse. Led by the hulking stoic Makhulu and the erratic, borderline, psychopathic Mr. T, they didn't just rule, they annihilated. They were the architects of an unprecedented reign of carnage, responsible for the deaths of over 100 rival lions, including females and cubs in acts of infanticide so brutal they bordered on the pathological. But even the most terrifying empires are built on shifting sands. Arrogance is a slow-acting poison, and as the Mapogos grew older, they grew complacent. The original Brotherhood of 6 eventually fractured. Kinky Tail, the fierce warrior with the mangled tail, and Mr. T, the unstable enforcer with the mohawk mane, split from the main group to patrol the eastern frontier. They believed they were still untouchable. They believed the fear they had sowed for years would keep the world at bay. They were wrong. While the Mapogos were busy basking in the ghost of their own glory, a new order was being forged in the shadows of the Majingilane. 5 young brothers, biological war machines known as the Majingilane, had crossed the border with a singular, grim purpose: total extermination. They didn't come for territory, they came for the Mapogos' heads. They were the new executioners, and they were patient. They moved through the bush with a military-like coordination that had never been documented in feline history. They were the Night Watch, a collective of muscle and hate that moved as a single entity. The first encounter between these two titanic forces wasn't a skirmish, it was a prelude to a nightmare. On the morning of June 8, 2010, Kinky Tail and Mr. T, fueled by the same unbridled aggression that had made them legends, tracked and isolated one of the 5 Majingilanes. In a display of raw, unrestrained power, they fell upon the young intruder. It was a message to the world that the kings were still here. Rangers watched in stunned silence as Mr. T and Kinky Tail worked in tandem to shatter the young Majingilane's spine, leaving him paralyzed and bleeding in the dust, while they roared their victory to the heavens. They thought the war was won. They thought the 4 remaining brothers would flee in terror. In the savannah, blood is the only currency that matters, and the Majingilanes were about to collect the debt with interest. The sun set that Tuesday with an unnatural stillness hanging over the reserve. The leopards had gone silent, the hyenas had retreated into the darkness, and even the air seemed to hold its breath. The bush knew that the price for the morning's blood would be paid in the dark. Under a shroud of absolute pitch, the game flipped. The 4 surviving Majingilanes, moving with a chilling synchronized silence, launched their retaliation. They didn't roar, they didn't announce their presence, they moved like ghosts through the high grass, closing the circle around the 2 Mapogo outcasts. Suddenly, the night was ripped apart by a sound that no guide will ever forget. The sound of a perfect ambush. Kinky Tail and Mr. T were surrounded. What followed was one of the most brutal scenes ever recorded in the history of African wildlife. The Majingilanes attacked with a systematic, almost sadistic fury. While 2 of them kept Mr. T occupied, preventing him from coming to his brother's aid, the other 2 focused every ounce of their aggression on Kinky Tail. It was a chaotic mass of muscle, claws, and teeth illuminated by the trembling spotlights of safari vehicles. Mr. T, battered and realizing that death was near, made a decision that is still debated in wildlife forums. He abandoned his brother. In an act of survival or cowardice, he broke through the line and vanished into the darkness, leaving Kinky Tail to face his fate alone. Kinky Tail's end was not quick. It was a prolonged, ritualistic dismantling. The Majingilanes didn't go for a quick kill. One attacker locked onto his throat while another began to systematically rip and tear at his hind legs and genitals. Witnesses reported a sickening crack that echoed through the night, the sound of Kinky Tail's spine being snapped like a dry twig by the 600-pound pressure of a Majingilane's jaws. The king was paralyzed, but he was still conscious. He was forced to watch as his enemies began to consume his lower half, while his heart was still beating. The one-by-one execution had begun in the most horrific way imaginable. By the time the sun rose, there was nothing left of the legendary warrior but a few scraps of hide and the memory of his final agonizing roars. The death of Kinky Tail was the green light for the Majingilane reign of terror. But the saga didn't end there. Mr. T, now a broken solitary exile, retreated back to the original coalition, finding his aging brothers Makhulu, Pretty Boy, and Rasta. However, the trauma of the defeat seemed to break something deep inside his psyche. This was the era where he earned the nickname Satan among the Rangers. Consumed by a blind, directionless rage, he began to slaughter the own cubs of his brothers within the coalition, an act of fratricidal infanticide that nearly destroyed the group from within. He became an erratic shadow, a specter of violence haunting the highlands while the Majingalanes solidified their iron grip on the east. The transition of power was marked by a chilling shift in the reserve's atmosphere. The Majingalanes, the vigilantes of the night, patrolled their borders with a cold, iron discipline. They were less flamboyant than the Mapogos, but, twice as calculated. They didn't just take the land, they purged the Mapogo bloodline with a terrifying efficiency, hunting down every female that carried the genes of the former tyrants. It was a genetic cleansing executed with a level of patience and method that seemed, honestly, almost human. In the forums and among the conservationists, the debates over this coalition war are, well, endless. Many argue that Mr. T and Kinky Tail were victims of a conspiracy of fate, citing rumors that Mr. T might have been groggy from a researcher's tranquilizer dart hours before the battle. But the Rangers who were there, the ones who saw the blood on the grass and the cold look in the Majingilane's eyes, deny it. They say what they saw was the raw, unadulterated reality of natural selection. A younger, more coordinated force overwhelming an old, decaying power. The Majingilanes would go on to rule for nearly 8 years, a staggering achievement in the life expectancy of a male lion. They survived buffalo goring, floods, and the rising challenges of newer, younger coalitions like the Matimbas and the Saladas. But time, the ultimate executioner, spares no one. The decline of the Majingalanes was as methodical as their rise. One by one, the brothers began to fall. The first was Hipscar, whose old injuries finally caught up with him, leading to a swift and lonely physical collapse. Then came Golden Mane, a magnificent warrior who succumbed to the festering wounds of a miscalculated buffalo hunt. In the end, only Darkmane and Scarnose remained. Two old veterans who once roared with the power of gods but now walked with a haunted, hollow look. Field reports from the time described these final days with a profound melancholy. They had lost the gaze of the predator and gained the look of the hunted. Without a strong coalition to protect them, and without females to hunt for them, the last Majingalanes became emaciated shadows of their former selves. It is the eternal cycle of the savannah. You climb to the top over the corpses of your enemies, only to find that the summit is a lonely, freezing place where every eye is watching for the moment you stumble. The story of the Mapogos and the Majingalanes is the greatest real-life drama ever staged in the African wild. It teaches us that while aggression can conquer a territory, only unity can hold it. It shows us that in the wilderness, revenge is a dish served hot under the moonlight, amidst the triumphant snarls of the victor and the dying screams of the defeated. And for Mr. T, the ultimate villain of this saga, the end was as poetic as it was brutal. On March 16, 2012, alone, and without the protection of his brother Kinky Tail or the original coalition, he was cornered by 4 young males of the Salati coalition. They did to him exactly what he had done to so many others. They immobilized him, and they broke his back. Satan died lying in the dust, paralyzed, staring at the vast African sky as his rivals celebrated the end of an era. Today, when the wind blows through the acacias in Sabi Sands and the roar of a new lion echoes on the horizon, the rangers still stop and listen. They know that beneath the soil that the safari jeeps traverse, the bones of kings are resting, and they know that somewhere in the darkness, a new coalition is already being formed, ready to repeat the cycle, ready to eliminate their predecessors, one by one, because in the savannah, power is never permanent. It is merely a loan paid back with blood interest. If you've made it this far, you understand that nature has no morality, only consequences. The fate of Kinky Tail, the fall of Mr. T, and the icy rise of the Majingalanes are reminders that life is a thin thread between being the executioner and being the executed. Reflect on that the next time you hear a lion's roar in the dead of night. The sound you hear might be the beginning of a reign, or the final scream of a legend that has just been collected by history. Which of these coalitions do you think was the most ruthless? The debate continues in the comments below, and the savannah, as always, remains silent, waiting for the next chapter to be written in red.